this to me, I was just like, yo, people are accusing you of being the reincarnate of Adolf Hitler. They're accusing you of being the most evil person in the world, conducting a brutal genocide. And you're up here cracking jokes about the people your government's killed while you lecture everybody. So as soon as this conversation starts, you're just already losing.
Dave Smith just lashed out against Benjamin Netanyahu's recent revolting speech at the UN, and in this clip, he talks about what an optics nightmare that was, and how it indicates pure evil on Netanyahu's part, and really is indicative of this whole gradual shift away from the Israel first mentality for many people that view it. So let's get a look at this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
The fact that Netanyahu's so out of touch, I mean, we could paint the picture for you here. Like, I'm sure a bunch of you have already seen the clips. We'll play a couple of other clips, but essentially the entire UN walks out on him before he starts his speech. Most of the countries left. If you see, there's like, you know, bird's eye pictures of it. The overwhelming majority of the room is empty seats, with the Israeli delegation cheering loudly for every word that he said, like, which is already just like the optics of it are not great. Not saying that proves anything one way or the other, but like the optics of this are bad. But like, there is an arrest warrant out for Netanyahu from the International Criminal Court over war crimes. He is being widely accused in pretty much every nation on earth. There are loud voices with huge percentages of the population who agree with them, accusing him of being guilty of genocide, carrying out a genocide of a captive people. And he gets up there for this speech, Rob, and he starts like, oh, look here, let's play the one clip. What's the one clip we have here of, I think the joke he made we have? Can we pull that up?
This is on
Suarez?
The pagers.
Yeah, that's right. Here we go.
You remember those beepers, the pagers? We paged Hezbollah, and believe me, they got the message. And thousands of terrorists.
Look at that. It's just Israel clapping. The optics of this could not have been worse scripted for an impartial observer to see this, where the rest of the UN generally walks out, and then there's this locale in Israel that cheers on, you know, talking about that recent murder, that recent terrorism, which took out innocents, by the way, in addition to Hezbollah. So, you know, this would not be something that anyone could do with any kind of impunity and just call the innocents that died to that just like human shields, just like they do in Gaza, or just collateral damage. No. And then this is how he's going to treat it. He's going to make a joke about it, and then he's going to have his own delegation clap for it. I can't see a worse optics response to this. And people are noticing, man, this is not something that they can hide much longer. And I'm so glad to see it on display, the evil of this man and how he's trying to conduct himself and carry himself. Insane.
Drop
again,
to the
yeah,
ground.
that's who's
Remember
cheering.
those beepers?
Okay, so anyway, that's just the look, dude. I'm just saying, and I understand you can say Hezbollah are terrorists or whatever. I mean, sure, like, you know, by any definition, are they more terrorists than the IDF? No, but I mean, Hezbollah is essentially a government. I mean, they've been, I think, you know, I think politically they've been in control of southern Lebanon for what, 20 years or something like that now.
Since 2000, actually, they've controlled southern Lebanon. So Dave's right about that. In control of southern Lebanon the entire time since then, essentially. And Israel's trying to expand its West Bank settlement and even flirt with the idea of annexing the West Bank because they want to go at the throat of Hezbollah, even though they've done that several times in the past, invading in, what was it, 1982 and 2006. They want greater Israel. They want to take over, destabilize Lebanon.
I mean, whatever. But just the idea, Rob, that you're like cracking jokes about the people your government kills in this environment seemed so profoundly out of touch. Like, I could, like, even watching it, I could, you know, and Netanyahu's always like, he's never been, look, Netanyahu, he speaks very good English, much better English than your average Israeli. And that's part of the reason why he's been the longest serving prime minister in Israeli history. He's good at kind of working an American crowd.
Yeah, he's a propagandist. He does several speeches in English just because that's his target audience. He is the U.S. president in some ways more than the actual U.S. president is, trying to sway Americans to side with Israel and everything, in Iran, in the genocide, in virtually everything that's been destructive to America's foreign policy in the Middle East.
But he's never been a particularly charismatic guy. He always has his little visual aids and his thing. It's like it's never like a great speech giver. But this, to me, I was just like, yo, people are accusing you of being the reincarnate of Adolf Hitler. They're accusing you of being the most evil person in the world, conducting a brutal genocide. And you're up here cracking jokes about the people your government's killed while you lecture everybody. And oh, by the way, on top of that, which is just something that nobody can ignore in this situation. And there's a fundamental disconnect here that the Israelis just seem to not understand this. But look, it is one thing if the leader of a nation, let's say the leader of Russia in the 20th century, whoever you want to pick, Gorbachev or Stalin or Khrushchev or whoever, the leader of the Soviet Union, or let's say the leader of the United States of America, or the leader of but Israel is a country the size of New Jersey who everybody knows is completely dependent on America to their survival. It's just, we have to give them billions of dollars. They could not conduct any of their wars without American support. We also have to give billions of dollars to the Jordanians and the Egyptians and the Saudis. We have to bribe every country that's ever gone to war with Israel in the region in order to keep them not going to war with them. And then for you to turn around and be bragging about the devastation your country imposes, you're not even self-sufficient. What are you talking about here? Sir, you're being accused of genocide and you're making wisecracks about the human beings that your government's killed? What are you doing?
Yeah, it seems like the worst place to put the microscope if that's the biggest allegation against you, and I think rightly so. I think he's a war criminal, and that's putting it lightly. He's guilty of fraud and corruption and genocide with U.S. backing. My government's culpable in it too, my criminal government, I hate to say. But this is the worst direction you could go if you want to take the focus off of that. So who's ever advising him is not smart. I just think that this argument is dead. They're so losing the argument and so desperate that they're just trying to throw spaghetti at the wall and hope something sticks. I think Dave's actually completely right in his assessment here.
I don't know, just so crazy to me.
And on that incident, it's not even all that clear to me that there weren't civilians that were killed in those attacks, as they
I think there were,
just in public places.
Yes. No, I think there were civilians who were injured and killed. I think the ratio wasn't bad. It was mostly the people they wanted to get, but still there's just, and even if you're just going to say those were the terrorists, it's if again, just in simple human terms, if my policy, my actions resulted in tens of thousands of dead children and people are furious about this, and then you get up there and I just start bragging about the bad guys I killed in this period of time, it's just very out of touch. And there's these other parts where, and I do think this part of the reason why I compared it to the COVID stuff or even the trans stuff is that, there was something like I would say from our perspective, what's the old saying, how you make a fortune or how an empire falls apart or whatever, but where they go slowly at first and then all at once. I think it was how did you go broke is what that came from, slowly at first and then all at once. With all of those things, at least from our perspective, Rob, right? That's how it happened, right? It's slowly, little by little by little, you start winning the argument, and then all of a sudden it's the floor just falls out, and it's just oh, that's it, it's over. It's crazy how quickly it can happen. And part of the reason why I'm feeling this way about the thing, because the other big part of his speech was now he has to respond to the fact that the UK and France have both publicly come out in support of a Palestinian state. And so he has to respond to that and do a whole section about like how they won't shove a Palestinian state down our throat.
Of course he does. This has been his line his entire time. He's built his political career on opposing a Palestinian state when better minds in Israel like Yitzhak Rabin were trying to follow a path toward that road, a peace policy, and Yitzhak Rabin was offed by a Netanyahu supporter. That's what happened. So, you know, this is just telling. You know, another thing in this speech that I took that was absurd is he tried to say, hey, we're not committing genocide in Gaza. We're just forcibly displacing the citizens. It's like, okay, that's exactly what the Third Reich did while they were committing a genocide too. It's just so absurd. You can't take him for real in any regard. He's always lying. You know that because he's moving his lips. And this is just so absurd. There's so much Hasbara propaganda in this, cheered on only by the Israelis. And if that isn't emblematic of where the world is on this, I don't know what to tell you. And I think Dave is right. You are seeing a lot of people wake up to this for the first time. It's not even a left or right issue. It's, you know, demographics. It's young people especially that are waking up to this. But you see major prominent politicians like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massey talk about Israeli influence in the U.S. and AIPAC's threat toward our sovereignty as Americans. If you want to be represented, it's not good to have, you know, a foreign government in the Middle East be more representative of your government than actual American citizens, but here we are. So I do think there's a mass awakening taking place. I think it's a good thing. I think it's only going to get more and more. And like Dave said, the floor could be falling out on this thing, man. It won't be in the next 2 years, but I think it will be in the next decade.
Again, I think it's something that's really ballsy when you're not a self-sufficient country. But I will say, man, and this has always been the game. Like this has been true for my entire lifetime, and it's part of the reason why Israel only survived reputationally in a very controlled media environment. And it's because as soon as you're talking about a Palestinian state, the Zionists are losing the argument. As soon as that's the topic, you're losing the argument very badly for obvious reasons. I mean, I'll spell them out, but this is why in a Zionist controlled media environment, the questions are always going to be framing the issue around, does Israel have a right to exist? Do you condemn Hamas? What about October 7th? Like it's always going to be framed in this way. They don't want to start talking about a Palestinian state because there simply is it's an indefensible position for so many reasons. Like, look, it is just totally not accepted anywhere in the advanced world that a state is something that you get to choose whether or not you give a group of people. Like it's the obvious norm for civilization at this point, for post-Enlightenment Western civilization, is that essentially there's two options, right? Like you either allow people to create their own state, like a group had, or if you're forcing them to be incorporated into a state, well, then they're citizens with voting rights.
Yeah, that's exactly right. This is why they don't want that subject on the table, and especially when it comes to a potential state where what are the remnants of the people that live there were forced out via terrorism in 1947 and 1948 through a UN partition plan that, you know, the Israelis just kicked out the people that lived on their land in Palestine, in that region. They got kicked out of their homes, forcibly displaced. About 750,000 people did, causing the start of what would eventually become an apartheid state, with Israel not gaining Gaza or the West Bank until the 1967 war, until the culmination of that war. But this is the creation of this dynamic, and then you're not going to give those people a state. You know, that would be letting the terrorists win. For them, those people that we say that, you know, are incompatible with our values, to allow them to live is, you know, Just way too much for Netanyahu.
That's the standard. You don't get to keep a group of people, say you can't have a government. In other words, we are your government, but you don't get to be a citizen or have voting rights within our system. Like, no one does that. And so as soon as the conversation is like, well, we're not going to allow you to give the Palestinians a state in Gaza and the West Bank, you go, well, so wait, so what is it? Is it Israel? If it's Israel, then you're an apartheid state that's holding millions of people without citizenship. And if it's not Israel, why do you get to determine whether or not they have a state? Like, even when he's like, oh, you want to reward, Hamas with a state. People in Western civilization do not conceive of a state as something that is a reward. It's like oh, you want to reward somebody with the right to live or something like that. Like, it's like that's not how anyone conceives of it. So as soon as this conversation starts, you're just already losing.
That's right. That's why anytime you're talking to a Zionist or a Zionist talks about these sorts of things, they never bring up the possibility of a Palestinian state. It's just off the table. And it does seem to be that case if you're looking at the ruling class and the regime and how they look at this right now. After October 7th, there's no way imaginable that could happen. That's the mentality. This idea that, nothing justifies October 7th. But in Israel's case, October 7th justifies anything Israel wants to do. So by talking about Israel has the right to defend itself, it was just minding its own business and got attacked again. Obviously not true. And, this mentality that Zionists hammer over and over and over again, they never visit the subject of a Palestinian state. Like Dave said, they've already lost the argument if that comes to the table, because virtually any people have a state to some extent. Any ethnic group, for the most part. There's obviously exceptions. There's, minority groups within states, etc. But this is one that essentially had most of a region and was kicked out of it through a massive land grab by the UN, backed mostly by the US and British in 1947 and 1948. And, America's tied itself to the hip of that regime almost ever since. Funding it, getting involved in its wars, bankrolling its genocide, looking the other direction when it does that, and giving them 20 billion US taxpayer dollars last year in the midst of an inflation crisis where people are having a hard time making ends meet here. I say no more. I say this is America last foreign policy. I'm glad that Netanyahu's speech looked so horrible like it did, that it was an optics nightmare. We need more and more optics nightmares to diminish the support that Israel continues to enjoy. You can tell that Netanyahu has isolated himself in world opinion. I hope the pressures come down on Trump to divert from this Israel first mentality at all costs. I'm not that hopeful at that, but I do see a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel in several years when we have more and more people shifting away from being so pro-Israel and older people naturally dying off. I'm not cheering on the death of other people, but there's no mistaking the fact that older people are much more pro-Israel, generally speaking, than the younger people who are displacing them in the populace. So that's where we're at. Let me know if you agree down below. Is Dave Smith right? Was this really an optics nightmare? And what can we take from Netanyahu's speech? Let me know in the comments down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Dave Smith. Awesome coverage of this. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel. And in return for that, I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live on the general channel. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.